Good morning and welcome to the third episode of Kind Words for Tired Teachers podcast. And I'm very lucky to have my guest today, Lauren O'Carroll, who is the founder of Positively Parenting. And also, I believe I'm right in saying that you're in the middle of a book about parenting with ADHD yourself. Can you tell me a little bit more about your book, first of all, and then we'll delve into your background, which is really fascinating.
Sure. So my book is all about what parents who have ADHD might need to know. So parents, when I became a parent, I sort of thought this elusive maternal instinct would take over and I would suddenly become a proper grown-up. And that doesn't happen.
We
You
all
still have
hope
ADHD. So yeah, it's a book to validate people who have been ADHD. Many women in particular are diagnosed late, so may have grown up not knowing they're ADHD. They may harbour a lot of shame from sort of growing up in a system that wasn't suited to them and not feeling understood. And that can come into our parenting. So it's less of a parenting book and more of like, how do you support your own nervous system to be calm so that you can be calm with your kids and regulate yourself and therefore be able to do the kind of parenting strategies that I would be teaching parents. So there's a little bit of like parenting frameworks there, but a lot of it is more about how do you sort of manage yourself so that you can enjoy parenting and that
makes sense.
Start off as a good parent.
And why, something you said really intrigued me. Why do you think so many women are diagnosed late? Are they very good at masking it, would you say?
Yeah, so I think particularly in a couple of generations ago, ADHD was really considered to be, the naughty little schoolboy, the boy who can't sit still and is running around the classroom and not listening to anybody. Girls tend to be more socially attuned and are much better at kind of looking at what everyone else is doing and holding in that impulse to move, but they will still have it. So it will still be visible. But I think many teachers, even now, won't notice or won't know what to look for, because it often will be, the behaviours that can often come with ADHD. I mean, we often see really quite challenging behaviours, but more often than not with girls, that behaviour is going to be coming home. So, the child will hold themselves in at school. They will sort of mask really well. They will try and do what everyone else is doing. They're kind of like tense all the time and copying what everyone else is doing, so no one sort of catches them. I certainly remember doing that myself.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they're back with their person of safety, which is normally the parent, hopefully the parent, then it all comes out. And I remember as an 8-year-old, my mum used to say, it's like you hit the teenage years early. You become like a monster. And I physically couldn't communicate with her. Like, I'd come out of school and I'd just be like so shut down and so like narky, and anything she would say would just irritate me so much. It was just like, if I say anything, I'm gonna swear at you and I'm gonna get in trouble and all of this, and I couldn't let that out. So I kind of went in. And lots of parents will come to me now and will also be going to school and saying, my child is, I suspect there's neurodiversity. I think it's ADHD, because when my child comes home, they explode and the behaviour is so awful and we can't get them to do their homework and we can't get them to X, Y, Z. They won't come and sit at the table and eat. They're like completely all over the place. They can't stay still for a second. And the teachers are like, well, no, we don't see any of that here. And
that annoying comment of, well, he or she never does that for me.
Similarly, don't do it at the grandparents. If you've got grandparents who are very traditional and might be quite strict, well, they don't do it here. It must be your parenting.
Yes, I can see.
Is because so many parents get gaslit, and I don't think it's intentional, but it's like, well, maybe you need to try a parenting course before we diagnose your child. Before we assess them, you need to go on a parenting course. And you need to learn how to parent first. This is obviously bad parenting. You must be giving them too much sugar. You must be letting them watch TV too much. And yes, those things can play into it. But almost always when a parent comes to me and says, I think my child is neurodivergent and school won't believe me, and I support them through getting a diagnosis in a different way, it turns out that they are ADHD, sometimes PDA, sometimes autistic. But you know, we went through that with my daughter. I got her privately assessed at 6.5 because nobody was listening to me, and I was just I felt so lost and so alone. And the teachers were lovely. It wasn't that they were lying. It wasn't that, you know, they got people to come and watch her. I had the family support worker who was basically saying to me what I'm saying, like generally parents have that knowing, and you've got to trust your gut.
Yes, I think you do, don't you?
Yeah.
I was sure that my child was dyslexic because he was so eloquent verbally, and then when it came to his written work, it didn't really sound like him. But they all said, no, he's absolutely fine. He's doing well. Look how well he's doing. And it wasn't until just before the end of school, actually, I took him privately. But even then, he was trying so hard with his writing in the assessment. She was saying, well, I can't see too many problems, you know, but he wasn't being normally how he normally is. And but I think as a parent, you know, don't you? So you knew.
But also it's really tricky for teachers because, you know, they have to look at certain criteria, and if that criteria is not being fit, it is not fitting, like, are they misbehaving? No. Are they running around and disrupting others? No. Are they swinging on their chair? Well, maybe not, but they might be like tapping their legs or squeezing
some kind of fidgeting.
But if the teachers aren't seeing that, and if the teachers don't have a full understanding of, I can't see anything, and I can't lie on a referral form for you. I'm not saying you're a lying parent, but like,
no.
And you know, I was speaking to somebody yesterday who was saying to me exactly the same thing, but she used to teach teachers. She used to be like one of the trainers on like a PGCE, teaching STEM curriculum. And she said if teachers are lucky, they get 1 day in the whole PGCE learning about STEM.
This is true.
So, can't expect teachers to know that.
And also what I found, because I used to sit in on quite a few of those needs meetings where the SENCO would be filling in the form, and there'd be all sorts of questions. And what was quite interesting is there were some subjects where the child would be completely different. And, you know, one teacher would be saying, oh, well, he or she's like that for me. And then the other two teachers over here would be saying, oh, no, that's a completely different child that we see. So I think that's the other confusing thing, isn't it? And it depends. PE, they will be running around, there'll be an outlet for energy, whatever. And whereas in English, where you do have to sort of concentrate, you have to write, whatever, which is what I taught or teach still, it might be different. So that confuses things further, doesn't it?
Yeah, and also I'm ADHD and I loved English. English was my thing.
Well, there we go. You see it.
I love writing. I love stories. So I was great in English. I was rubbish in PE, and I'm really hyperactive, but my hand-eye coordination is rubbish. So I would be like, I think a lot of neurodivergent kids will struggle with like lots of their sensory systems, with their kind of proprioception, and they might not know where their body is in space, for instance, and they might actually struggle with PE more. But you won't get the same behaviors necessarily. But you know, it's just so different for every child. That's the other thing. Like there's no sort of one size fits all. And the diagnostic criteria, the DSM for diagnosing ADHD, which is like the sort of international diagnostic manual that all doctors have to use to assess. It is recognized that emotional regulation, the ability to kind of regulate our emotions in different environments, is like probably the biggest like difficulty for people with ADHD, yet it's not in the DSM. So there's a way to go.
Absolutely. And what can we do? I mean, I note that obviously a lot of parents of ADHD children will be ADHD diagnosed themselves, maybe not until later. What can we do as teachers to support both the children and also the parents? Let's start with the parents, because I think the parent might be in a very confusing and, you said, quite a lonely place where perhaps people aren't really believing that they are having these difficulties. Maybe they're struggling with their own regulation as well. What can teachers do to support parents? Because I always believed in having quite a good, if possible, regular contact with parents, particularly of kids who are struggling in some way.
Yeah.
What can we do to help?
I think the key thing really is empathy and kindness and belief. I think it's really hard because if you're a parent with ADHD and you've got a child who's really struggling and you're completely, at your wit's end, and you meet a kind and compassionate teacher, it's really hard for that teacher because that parent is going to be like, oh my God, I found somebody.
Yes. Yeah.
And I'll give you an example. Like, my daughter, she's only in primary, she's in year 4 now. Her teacher this year, and she was specially kind of matched with this teacher because, she was having emotional based school avoidance and all sorts of things. It was really, really challenging. And it was identified by her play therapist, who was assigned by the school because of the emotional based school avoidance, that she needed a teacher who was going to form a really positive attachment with her.
Okay.
This teacher has just come off, literally, like last year, she was doing an MA in autism. So she just understands my daughter. But prior to that, she was already the teacher who was just really interested in the well-being of the kids, seeing the whole child, creating environments that felt safe. And, since the beginning of that year, just everything is just brilliant. She meets my daughter before everyone else goes in. She'll come and meet her at reception and take her up. She's the only person who can get her in the door. The TAs
Oh,
come
bless
and
her.
it's
Yeah.
like impossible. She will come and she'll kind of give her a big hug and take her in,
Yes. Yeah.
But that's possible because they've got this amazing relationship. And I think that's almost more important. Well, it is more important than having that amazing relationship with the parent, is if you can create that with the child and help the child to have a sense of safety. In turn, that's going to help the parent to trust what you're doing. If you don't build that relationship with the child, then I think then it becomes very difficult for the parent to trust what you're saying and what you're doing. And I think then the parents can be much more like challenging you as to what is going on, because we're always on the defensive because we have to be. But what I really noticed with this teacher, I mean, she's teaching a class of 36 and there's quite a few kids with additional needs. After school, there is a queue to see her every single day because she makes time for those parents. And I mean, I gave her your book for Christmas.
Oh, bless.
Cried,
Oh, I remember. It was her, was it? You told me that someone had cried. I'm like, yeah.
And I think it's because she felt seen.
Yeah.
But also, I mean, she's just going so far above and beyond. But actually, the interaction I have with her is much less because I trust her to come to me to say
yes.
problem, and she does frequently.
So you don't need that constant contact because it happens when it needs to. Yeah, that makes sense.
Whereas the previous teacher didn't understand Sen at all, didn't have a good relationship with my daughter, didn't see her struggles. And, I was always emailing. I was always trying to catch her after school. I was always, having to copy the Senko into everything. I was arranging meetings all the time because it felt so, I didn't trust that the things were happening. My daughter was coming back and telling me that she wasn't allowed to fidget, she wasn't allowed to go to the toilet, all these things that are in her plan. And that really, it made me so cross, so scared, so insecure, so sort of concerned for what was going on, that I gave that teacher far more admin, not intentionally to make her job harder, but just like, I need you to do these things that you're doing. These are on the plan.
And you're advocating for your child, which is, of course, what all parents do, don't they?
Yeah.
And because you're being a responsible parent and your main priority, everyone should be, is the child. I can really see how that could play out. So what do we do for teachers to help them to be that amazing kind of teacher, the kind of teacher that your daughter has now? Because she will move on, and of course there'll be, I would imagine, concerns about the next person that is looking after her. Yeah.
Honestly, and I'm even more terrified about secondary. And I see I work with a lot of parents of kids in secondary who have been completely broken by the system. I think the key thing is creating safety for the kids. I think above anything, children don't learn if they feel unsafe. And children who have emotional based school avoidance and are forced into school and there's new government legislation which is coming in to try and make it even harder for parents to keep their kids out of school. I don't know any parent who wants to homeschool their kids. Well, I do know a few, but like any parent who's like, child has been in school and they've got emotional based school avoidance, and they're like, oh yay, goody, I get to homeschool them. Like, most parents have stuff to do.
Of course they do. I mean, we found that during lockdown that parents were like, wow, okay, you actually do quite an amazing job really as teachers, don't you? Because it to keep a child engaged and learning and stimulating and all the rest of it for a whole day is quite something, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's just that creating safety, creating a place where there's a communication, there's the ability for each child in the class to communicate with the teacher in a way that feels right. And I think it's taking that time at the beginning of the year to figure out what that is for each child. I think that pays dividends. I know it takes time. I think it's also about taking time, especially in primary, to welcome the children into the classroom. I mean, there's been research to show how helpful it can be to give kids a genuine welcome. There's one teacher, I can't remember what his name is, but he gets down on his knees in primary, and he's at the door and he shakes everyone's hand and he asks them how they are, and it's just so lovely. And his kids is brilliant. But I think it's understanding each child, and that's in secondary. I think that's almost impossible because you have so many kids. But again, I think the message I would give to teachers is, kids do well if they can. If a child is misbehaving, if they are being obstructive, if they're throwing stuff at you, if they're swearing at you, if they are completely ignoring you and making a mockery out of you and trying to like rile all the other kids into stuff, that's generally because they're not feeling safe. They're either feeling like they're stupid and they need to distract and not let anyone know that they're stupid, so they're acting out. They may feel like the teacher hates them, and it might be like a defensive thing. But kids generally, if they are in the right environment and if they're they're being taught in a way that is on some level interesting, and that again is really hard because you can't interest and engage a whole class.
No,
everyone learns differently. But I think it's just believe, like, if you've got a child who is being really disruptive, really difficult, rather than reaching for punishment as the first thing, thinking about, okay, can I have a chat with this child at the end of and say, what's going on?
Exactly. Yeah.
Are you okay? That should be the first question we're asking. And I know that when your class is chaos, that's a really hard thing to do. I mean, that's why I do this work with parents, because we just want to scream back at the kids and shout at them, and
but that's not going to help.
Children.
You definitely have to. I'm thinking back to my experience with various children I've taught. You do have to, I think, be consistent. For me, I never gave up on a child. I'd try anything. I'd talk to their form tutor. I'd talk to their parent if I could. Sometimes I didn't get anywhere with the parents, but I wouldn't be giving up, because it's like a puzzle. You want to solve. I think if you care about everyone's well-being, then I think it is like a bit of a puzzle. And I think I'm really understanding even more now. Now I work one-to-one with children with ADHD, DHD, the autism and ADHD and anxiety, whatever, at the provision centre I work at. So it won't surprise you, I'm sure, to hear that there are never any behaviour issues. And if there are, it's going to be something like PDA. It's pathological demand avoidance, isn't it, PDA? And that's going to be triggered by something that we then investigate or whatever. But there aren't any problems because the needs are being met. And so I think, would you say it's true that for some children, they're really better in another setting rather than the class of 36? I mean,
my daughter, I'm fairly sure, is PDA. She's sort of on the pathway for an autism assessment at the moment.
Okay.
But very much presents as PDA. And we're continuing the school system as long as we can.
Yeah.
But, to be honest with you, I think the education system is not great for most kids. There is a small handful who learn well in that environment. I love the kind of ethos of like Steiner or anywhere where it's a bit more interest driven. I think homeschooling can work brilliantly, but find me a parent who, especially a parent with ADHD, who has another job, especially
Yes.
as an entrepreneur, many of us are.
Yes.
I mean, that scares me. And having to do that for my child, because I think that the executive functioning challenges that we have then get escalated further, right? It's like,
yes,
the idea of planning how I'm going to teach my child the things that she needs to learn, especially if I've got 2 kids, unless that's my hyper focus, I don't know how I would do that. I mean, it's just too big for my brain right now to figure out.
But to be fair, I mean, unless you set out to be a teacher, I think that homeschooling isn't the answer for everyone. I really, and
I think it's
I,
sometimes the only option
of
available
course,
to parents
exactly.
in a position like mine. And
I think it's difficult, isn't it? Because I look at, I admire the parents that come to the centre where I work. Usually it's the mum. One of the parents has usually given up work, more or less, because they are available then for their child and to deal with all the issues that come up on a daily basis. And that makes it really tricky, doesn't it?
yeah.
But I think at least they can relax knowing that when they get there, their child is in a very safe space, in a place where they feel accepted, and then at least I hope that I see them on their laptops trying to get little bits of work done in between the breaks between lessons and stuff. But it's really tough, isn't it, being a parent? It's tough being a parent anyway, but being a parent who has all these extra issues and challenges to sort of deal with, particularly if, as you say, you're dealing with them yourself anyway, in your own head, in your own mind.
I mean, I used to see it as I had 3 or 4 different jobs. I had the job of, I used to work at Adam Brooks Hospital. I used to be an ops manager in a really, really big hospital and a really, really big team. And
Yes.
I had that job. Then I had the job of being a parent to neurodivergent kids, which I think is a very different job to being a parent of neurotypical kids.
Yeah.
There are big behaviors, there are big anxieties,
Yeah.
there are lots of things that come up which are really scary to hear and deal with as a parent. And trying to navigate the healthcare system and the mental health system and all of those things and figuring out, how do I manage all of this? Then I had the role as an advocator in school, trying to get diagnoses, trying to ensure the SEND plans follow, trying to ensure there is a SEND plan, all of those things. Trying to write an EHCP plan, everything. There's so much, and
Yes.
and then you've got to try and run a household. That it's insane what is put on parents. And if you look at the stats for parents of SEND children, most of them have had to reduce hours or
Exactly.
take cut or leave work. And I think that's a really unseen problem, and I think it's really underrepresented. And also, you look at relationship breakdowns in that subsector. People with ADHD tend to have worse relationships, and then you add on you having your own child.
All those other, as you say, those many hats, many jobs. Yeah.
So then you start to see more poverty, and then the cycle continues. And I think
yes, because I mean that's the other thing. It's probably slightly easier if you come from a reasonably affluent background. And interestingly, I sort of look at again the parents that come to us. Often they are typically middle class, well educated, because they've got the tools already to fight the system. They're in a better place, and that makes me very sad actually. And the confidence, the kind of poise, the belief, whatever, that makes me quite sad, because I think that means then, as you were referring to, that there's a big divide, and there'll be parents who are absolutely desperate for help, who won't have that self-belief, that confidence, that knowledge. They won't have the tools, if you like, to start fighting the system, or to start
and also
approaching a good situation for their family.
And also I think the school can be quite a difficult environment. Teachers are authority figures. Parents, particularly parents who are neurodivergent themselves, and if you look at ADHD as an example, it is almost as inheritable as height. So, you know, you kind of assume that your child is going to be a similar height to you and your partner, like,
Yes. Yes.
right? Or like boy, same height as dad, girl, same height as mum. So, you know, it figures that the parent's most likely going to be neurodivergent as well. So if they've had a tricky time at school, and then they've got a child who's in school having a tricky time, it's really, really hard to have the confidence to stand up against those authority figures, those scary people like teachers, and say, you've got this wrong.
Yeah.
How do you say to a teacher you've got this wrong when you've been told all your life by teachers that you're the one who's wrong? There's a lot of blocks to get through there. And the other part of it is that parents have then said, you know, you say, I think my child's neurodivergent. Okay, well, we think it's bad parenting, so we're going to send you on a parenting course first. You've got to do that. And if we believe that you've implemented everything on this parenting course, then we will refer you for an assessment. Now, obviously, this isn't teachers saying this is the state saying this, but teachers have to give the message. It's, you know, let's not shoot the messengers here. But the message that parents get is like, okay, I'm not believed. They think I'm a bad parent. And then they go to the parenting courses, and the parenting courses tell them to do behaviorist strategies like, you know, ignore them if they're crying, send them to their room, put them on the naughty step, all of this stuff, which we know doesn't create safety, escalates behavior, creates this divide and this kind of disconnect between parent and child, and makes everything worse. And going back to your previous point, because I just want to make it before we finish, because I think it's really important. You said earlier in this podcast about not giving up on children, and I think that is huge, because often parents, especially in deprived backgrounds where they might be having to work 2 or 3 jobs as well, they just don't have the time to devote to kind of trying to help their kids through some of this stuff. They've been told to like punish their kids, and that's not working, because it doesn't. You know, it might work short term, but by the time they're teenagers, that's not working, and you've lost your influence.
Sure.
So the parent might give up on the child. Also, at the same time, all of the teachers, one by one, are giving up on the child. So by the time the child's like 13, 14, everyone's given up on them. Everyone's like, well, we can't, you know, you're just a bad kid, right? That's what they're feeling, even if no one's saying it to them. It's like, well, I go into this class, I get sent out and sent into wherever the school sends them. Going to this class, I'm allowed to sit in the class, but I'm basically ignored, and I get those looks. I go into this class with this teacher who I really like, and somebody triggers me, you know, I've had sensory overwhelm or something, I explode a bit, and now that teacher's giving up on me. And it's like,
it's a really sad,
I don't believe in myself,
sad situation.
No one believes in me. I go down the slippery slope of, well, you know, what else should we do?
So just to wrap this up then, I mean, I think we're coming from the same place. You know, teachers within the best possible way want to help the kids. They really do. And I think it's very sad in cases where they can't, or feel unable to, or, as you say, give up. And I know from colleagues I've worked with, and, you know, the endless patience that a lot of these teachers do have. I hope these cases are becoming much more isolated. I hope that with a bit of education from people like you, and a little bit more thought and perhaps changes in practice, that this will become a much rarer situation. And you know, I'm just very grateful that you've been able to talk to us about this, because I think in your bio that you sent me, you talked about the beautiful chaos of ADHD. Let's look at before we finish, let's look at some of the fantastically creative and wonderful things that the ADHD brain is capable of, because I think that's what we need to focus on, don't we? It can be a blessing, not just a curse. So tell me a little bit about, you know, let's say take you or take your daughter. What are the things that your ADHD brain enables you to do better than probably someone who is normal, as we used to call it, but we don't now?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a drive. I think we're very resilient. We might not appear resilient at school, but every single day we're building resilience, because we're working in a system that's kind of not for us. And
Yeah,
there's this incredible creativity when it's given the opportunity to shine. And you know, I think that's really hard for teachers as well to unleash, because there's such a tight curriculum, and
I was going to say there isn't space, unfortunately, for
yeah,
us to be as creative as we would like to be as well,
yeah.
you know.
And you might be having to like cross curriculum certain things, so it's
Yeah,
like
yeah,
this into art, and therefore suddenly
yeah,
art isn't fully creative, it's not.
that's right.
And I think that that does a disservice to a lot of brains. But I mean, I think you just need to look at like the people who have made like significant differences in the world, people who've done
Absolutely.
things that have
The
like
visionaries, really.
of
Yeah,
humanity, what we see as normal, sending us. I mean, I can't remember who was the mastermind between sending someone up to the moon or whatever, but
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I genuinely believe that it's those neurodivergent brains who think outside the box, because we don't see the box. It's not, we're like, oh, we're going to go and think outside it. It's just not there.
No,
I think it's those brains that aren't sort of constrained by what is typical thinking.
expected, or yes.
Yeah, are the ones who are going to sort of solve the climate change crisis,
Mm-hmm.
the ones who are going to sort of find a way through, I don't know, whatever next crisis comes and hits us.
Yes,
I think we need to nurture those brains. I think we need lots of different
absolutely.
brains to do lots of different things, because we need neurotypical brains to give us the sandbag so that we don't get distracted.
The structure and the, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah. No, I love this. And I think that's really why I wanted to finish on this, because we need to, and we should, and I hope that mainly we do, really celebrate all the diversity there is within the classroom. And I think you've just given us some really good tips, things like being consistent. We mentioned the not giving up. Also, the idea that parents themselves might be struggling through that kind of feeling quite defensive and on the back foot, particularly if they're also struggling with all these things at home that you very effectively painted for us, the life at home, particularly when a child has managed to kind of hold it all in during the school day and then is kind of in their safe space. You've mentioned safety a lot, and I think what I'd like to do is just to remind everyone listening, really, that if we can create a safe space for a child, and by extension then for their parent, I think that's a wonderful thing for the education system to be able to do, and then wonderful things can happen. And no one's saying it's easy, but I think if we keep having these kinds of conversations, then the climate is going to change in education. And certainly from the teachers I've worked with, I know that there is that desire there, that desire to make things as comfortable, but at the same time as stimulating, as stretching, as challenging as possible, so that young brains can soak up all the knowledge and come out with these wonderful, out of the box, sparky, creative ideas. Because, as you say, that's what we need to move forward.
yeah.
Thank you so much. I could talk to you for hours, but I guess we've both got other things to go off and do. So it's been a real pleasure talking to you. We'll put your contact details below in the notes.
But otherwise, you could email me, lauren@positivelyparenting.co.uk, or my website, positivelyparenting.co.uk.
Because I'm sure people will have things to ask you. And I know you run these amazing courses for families with ADHD and sort of helping them to enjoy family time, as well as navigate all the major and minor dramas that happen along the way. But thank goodness for people like you. It's been fascinating. Thank you so much.
Lovely to speak to you, Viv. Bye.